You know, I never tell you guys this, but I love you for recommending me this stuff. The Long, Long Holiday is a French animated miniseries from 2015 consisting of 10 episodes, or 5 episodes if you're watching them in pairs, about World War II from the perspective of children living in a German-occupied Normandy. It took me forever to get around to finally watching this, but I am so eternally grateful I did, because this show is absolutely incredible, and I don't think it's overselling it to say it may be one of the best children's shows ever made. It's a remarkably nuanced, thoughtful, and very digestible representation of World War II, without ignoring the very real horrors of war and the ever-lingering consequences of it. With an appealing 2D, 3D hybrid animation style, wonderfully charming characters, and a somber, melancholic story, The Long, Long Holiday easily earns its status as a timeless classic that can and should be viewed by anyone of any age. It's simply magnificent. One of my new favorite shows of all time. And if you want to watch it for yourself, the first 2 episodes are on YouTube as a 50-minute double feature, and the rest of the episodes are on Internet Archive. The archive is your friend. So, without further ado, let's weeble bop the schneedle deedle. France, circa 1939. 2 siblings, Ernest and Colette, are sent to live with their grandparents in Normandy while their father serves in the upcoming war and their mother is sent away to have her illness treated. Thus begins the longest holiday of these children's lives. As they adjust to this new life, they become acquainted with several neighborhood kids, such as Jean, Lily, Fernand, and even the 2 bullies, Marcel and Gaston, soon become their friends. They all form a tight-knit secret clubhouse shrouded in the forest. They declare themselves the Robinsons, in reference to Robinson Crusoe. And as they witness the German occupation of their small village, they form a brewing mini-rebellion along with the help of a few noble adults to help in any small way to turn the tide of the war. A very engaging setup using the backdrop of World War II to tell an important, poignant, and compelling story. And what really sells this solid narrative are the lovable and memorable characters. This roster feels so identifiable and so well realized. The Robinsons have the same appeal to me as the Digi-Destined, and I am not being hyperbolic. These kids stood up to the fucking Nazis, facing insurmountable odds every step of the way, and did this for 6 long years. Tell me that's not badass. Ernest is a very likable frontman for the Robinsons. He always stands up for what's right, but he's also acutely aware of the consequences of disobeying the laws the Germans set in place. His main priority is to keep his sister and his friends safe, and despite being an intimidated kid in a very dire time in history, his morals and convictions always take center stage in the end, as he braves the threat of the Third Reich with his friends and family behind him. Colette is Ernest's little sister, and the elder version of herself is the narrator of the story. Her old and weathered voice, contrasted with the happy, wide-eyed innocence of her younger counterpart, really cements the melancholy of the story. This little girl lived through a very tragic period in her childhood, having very little understanding as to why all of this was happening. And when you hear her older self recounting the atrocities of World War II, it really weighs on your heart. With that said, Colette's narration isn't all doom and gloom. A lot of it is rather reminiscent and nostalgic. Because while the events around her were no doubt terrifying, she still had the luxury of childhood naivete that kept her hopes high and heart strong during these trying times. Lily is the resident weird kid who's always skulking about the forest, but she's easily the most adventurous, daring, and assertive of the group. But despite her tough exterior, she has the kindest moral compass and a compassion for the less fortunate. Fernand is a confident, intelligent, and often ostracized preteen who frequently has to stand up for himself, but does so with the utmost dignity and integrity. His Jewish status makes him a prime target for bullying, but through his conviction and unwavering stance, he actually manages to change some of the minds of the Robinsons, such as Jean, who is from a a posh upper-class family and starts off mirroring the same prejudices his elders exhibit upon learning Fernand is Jewish. But he's quick to recant those previous beliefs and forms a strong friendship with people he never thought he'd acquaint himself with. Marcel starts off as an obnoxious bully to Ernest, and for the first few episodes, that seems like it's not gonna change. But he soon realizes his immature squabbles are wasted energy when he could just as easily be friends with him. And so, he joins the Robinsons alongside his little brother Gaston. And speaking of Gaston, this kid is awesome. He may just be my favorite character. He starts off mimicking Marcel's abrasive behavior, but there's a hint of apprehension to it, especially considering his crush on Colette. We learn very quickly that Gaston is pure of heart and tries his best to help those in need. He soon becomes one of the most integral members of the Robinsons, as he helps an injured British fighter pilot who later aids the Robinsons in their rebellion. These kids have become some of my most treasured characters of all time. Their bravery and dedication to their cause is exemplary and admirable, and not one character steals the show. Everyone gets equal amounts of development and are treated with respect. And I haven't even talked about the adult characters yet, but we'll get to them a bit later. For now, let's dive into spoilers so I can really show you the meat and potatoes of it all. Here's your time code, but seriously, watch the show. First off, I want to quickly go over the flaws, which there are very few, actually. The only two flaws I can think of are the way they completely unceremoniously kill Muddy the pig off-screen by implying he gets eaten by a goddamn Nazi, especially considering they establish how much Colette loves this pig. But once he's gone, her narration is like, oh yeah, Muddy died, but I got over it pretty quick. Whatever. Like, what the hell? What was the point of this little pig character if there was no emotional payoff to his death? And that leads to another problem I have. Sometimes the narration, as inoffensive as it is, can also just gloss over stuff as if they're footnotes in the story. I personally would have liked to have seen more of an emotional punch to certain characters' deaths, considering they do so for others. But that's basically it for flaws. I know, right? Usually there's so much more. Now I get to talk about what this show gets right, which is quite a lot. This show is rich with themes. One of the most prominent themes is, suitably enough, the horror of war. There are some unironically intense set pieces of gunfire, violence, and warfare. There's no blood, but people do die. In episode 3, Ernest, Colette, and their grandparents are being evacuated out of Normandy, only to be ambushed by German fighter planes aiming to gun down these civilians. This scene is phenomenally shot and composed. The intensity is palpable and white-knuckling, the stakes are legitimate, and in an additional dramatic turn of events, the children's grandmother gets separated to the other side of the bridge, and moments later, the French army detonates the bridge in a blazing fireball. It's a truly heart-racing scene. Another great example is the end of episode 7, when Operation Jubilee is in full swing. We only really hear the bombs and gunfire going off on the beach, but the children's horrified reactions and fades to black leave so much horror to the imagination. But aside from the confronting nature of real-life warfare, this also shows the horrific consequences of war. In episode 6, the classmate character Antoine, who in previous episodes has been established to be a quirky, eccentric, but friendly companion, is unfortunately killed by a landmine on the very beach that would be stormed an episode later. A kid just planning an innocent bout of carefree play was harshly punished for it. And he's not the only soul claimed by this show. In the very next episode, Fernand refuses to wear his Star of David as an act of rebellion against the Germans. This, however, goes just about as well as you'd expect, because this bootlicking snitch Durand, we'll get to him later, rats out the child and the soldiers apprehend him and send him away to Auschwitz. And in the last episode of the show, Colette's narration confirms he was murdered in the camps along with countless others. The show is brutally honest about what happens in war, the injustice of it all, the heartache it causes, and the frustration of being completely powerless to stop it. Which neatly segues us into the secondary themes of the show: resistance and humanity. These themes are exemplified throughout the show by many, many characters, and not just the Robinsons. Renee, Robert, Mr. Herpin, and Otto also showcase them brilliantly. Robert and Renee are the father and grandfather of Ernest and Colette, and actively stand up for themselves and their own at the cost of their livelihoods. Mr. Herpin starts off suspicious of the Robinsons sneaking around and plotting of their rebellion, but we later find out that he's actually the resistance leader codenamed Sparrowhawk, and he is quick to aid the children in their efforts and even expresses great pride in them. Sparrowhawk served in the First World War in the French army as a teen, so his life has been dedicated to smoking fascists, a cause that he eventually dies for as he is killed off-screen trying to buy time for the other characters to escape. And then there's Otto, the German soldier who's reluctantly following orders, but slowly falls in love with the Morteau widow he and his colleague were stationed to bunk in the house of. Otto goes to great lengths to sabotage his colleague's schemes and investigations in favor of protecting Jeanne and her 3 sons. And in the end, he ends up as Jeanne's new loving husband. The show does a great job balancing both the dark griminess of war, but also the shining examples of humanity and resistance that reinvigorate the soul and restore faith in people. As the great Sam Wise once said, "There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." And this show takes that sentiment to heart. No matter how much adversity you face, losing hope and losing your fight is the biggest disservice you can do for yourself. In other words, the indomitable human spirit got to me, Jerry. Oh, and I promised you some Durand discussion, didn't I? Okay, so basically, this guy is a Nazi knob-polishing tattletale who is responsible for sending several people to their deaths, one of them being Fernand. See, from this guy's perspective, the Germans have implemented order in this small village, and to keep his sorry ass safe from any Nazi wrath, he kisses up to them like a teacher's pet and constantly harasses the child characters, trying to get them imprisoned or killed. He does get some light comeuppances here and there throughout the show, but it's not until the last episode, after the war is finally over, Durand is cornered by resistance fighters, seeking vigilante justice for all the innocent lives lost. Durand is brought behind a building and gunned down like a mangy dog. A very cold, realistic, and admittedly satisfying character death. Fucking creep-ass Nazi-sympathizing bootlicker. Like I said, the show constantly seesaws between the ugliness of war and the fighting spirit that overcomes it. Colette's narration even states that just because the war is over, that doesn't mean it was all smiles and laughter. Many sought revenge, and are willing to go to many lengths to achieve it. The themes here are rich, nuanced, plentiful, juicy as all fuck, and remarkably consistent throughout. It's a high recommendation for sure. Oh, I'm done. The Long, Long Holiday needs to be watched by everyone. It's an incredibly accessible and digestible story with universal themes and well-rounded, multifaceted, engaging characters that will no doubt steal your heart. It's got so much going for it and so much to offer. It's one of the most criminally slept-on TV shows of all time, and hopefully we can turn this around and get more people watching it. I can't think of a more deserving specimen than this. Link for the first 2 episodes on YouTube is in the description. Check it out, see if it's something you'll be into. And that's all for now, folks. Remember to shoot tennis balls at your ass cheeks. Thanks for watching. Now I'm gonna go dissociate.